Hi, everyone, and welcome to our third issue of the Retails podcast. Hi, Toby. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm currently spending a few days in Joshua Tree, so I'm moving my location around as safely as I can.
Jolly good. And I see you're still avoiding the sunshine and the squint in the eye like we did from the last issue. So we'll enjoy watching Toby start to lean across the screen again. Today we have a very interesting guest, Torben Valsted, who until recently was a Nike Insights and Analytics guy. And you actually introduced me to him via LinkedIn. He sounds like he has some really interesting insight and approaches to the behavioral side of shopping.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I think he was over in Amsterdam and then I got the chance to work with him directly. But I think what's interesting is his background's very much in the retail business planning side. So the people who understand how many units of one shoe should go into which country and those things. And he's transferred a lot of that knowledge of the more, say, hard side of analytics and then started to understand kind of the voice of the consumer. And it's something at Nike that we really try to hard to lean into. So I think he's got some really interesting views on the importance of qualitative data as well as quantitative data.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is going to become very interesting and relevant. It's been growing in importance of retail anyway. But I think particularly as we're very nervously starting to look at maybe life beyond the pandemic, I think there's some fascinating stuff because, you know, I'm seeing a lot of reports and information coming out. There's a lot of research into behaviors and channels that people are using. And I was just reading this afternoon a report from McKinsey where they were looking at shoppers' intentions to use the channels they've been using recently. And while it's unfair to criticize because we don't know the reasoning behind the report and how it's being used, I've seen a lot of people take this data and use it as fact to predict that physical retail is dead and we're all online. And personally, I think that's absolute rubbish because we're asking people how they're going to shop, as we all know, doesn't mean they're going to shop that way. So I see most research about what's going to happen is pure guesswork, and I presume you feel the same.
Well, it's interesting because I think the more traditional consultancies, there's probably some air quotes around those, but the McKinseys of the world and the Accentures, those kind of people, I think one of the things that they have been really good at is leaning really heavily into the analytical side of data. And so when companies have been working with those organizations, they've brought in huge amounts of data. They've got touch points all over the place. They really are able to pull that information together. The problem is that since the pandemic, all of those numbers don't mean anything. Yeah. Like basing a future vision on historic data when, you know, we all had to lock into our house and all the stores are closed. And like there was, if you wanted to get milk at some point, you couldn't go to the shops to get milk. You had to buy it online. And so for many older generations who felt like they could avoid online shopping and now having to do those things, it completely, if you ask the intent of that audience, they would have said they'd never go online. They didn't want to go online. But with the pandemic, they had to go online. And so there's a real shift of choice versus had to. And I think what's interesting is that it's accelerated a lot of people's digital behaviors, which we could sort of predict. But you can't generate or can't write the future based on just historic information. It's just it doesn't enable you to get to an innovative new space. It just expects the past and extrapolates that into the future.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's bring Torben into the chat because I'm pretty sure he's got an awful lot to say on this. So we'll bring him in now.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Torben. How are you?
Hey, I'm really good. Good morning to Toby and good afternoon to Ian.
And to you. We can't see you at the moment, Torben. Is your video on?
No, I'm hiding myself.
Oh, you've been very elusive. There he is.
There I am.
Flying in the sky with these geese. And we'll touch on the geese because you were talking about that a little while ago when we had a catch-up call.
I love geese. No, they're fascinating animals.
Well, we'll certainly get onto that. So Toby and I were just starting the conversation, really discussing the challenges of insight and data as people are trying to predict the future of retail as we come out of the pandemic. And I know you have quite a few views on this sort of subject as well.
Yeah, you know what? I think there are so many attempts at the moment at trying to, predicting the future, right? And we tend to kind of extrapolate what we see and what we feel. All of us, has been a difficult year for most people, right? And I think we feel, all of us, some of the changes that is happening around us. The biggest question I have in my mind is, how fundamental are those changes, right? I believe that you don't change habits, you replace them with new ones.
Yeah.
And for me, the real question is, have we replaced the habits that we had before COVID happened, right? Because a lot of people are saying, hey, yeah, digital is surging, we're all buying online. Hey, we didn't have any alternative, right? So where would we buy, right? We had to buy online. The question is that a fundamental change, right? Is that speaking to the nature of humans and how we want to interact with products and with retailers and with other people? Because I think retail is also a social event. Mm-hmm. It's also this getting out and being among other people, is holding the product, right? Yeah. Before you actually buy it. And of course, it's convenient to buy online. And I'm not talking negatively about online sales whatsoever. I just think we have to be very careful extrapolating what we see today and think that physical retail will not happen again. I absolutely believe it will. I think we learned some things, and I think we have to, keep improving, keep evolving retail with those learnings, right? I mean, a lot of people, all of the buzzwords in this industry, right? We've been talking about omni-channel for many years. Recently, we are talking about online to offline. If you look at it, and everybody wants to be consumer-centric, right? If you look at it from a consumer perspective, I'm sorry, but consumers don't think channels anymore. No, mm-hmm. they don't think lines. And what do we do as retailers? We actually organize ourselves according to those words, right? We have different channels inside our companies that are operated by different teams. And we actually have lines, right? How many companies don't have a line between the online team and the offline team? They all have it, right? We all have it.
It's funny. Makes no sense. It's one of those things we've been talking, and kind of some of the other issues around the people who are doing really well are the digital native companies. I always use companies Absolutely. Like Everlane and some of the Away. And the reason that they do so well is that they aren't set up in that way. There is only make the thing, get the thing into people's hands and market the thing. And so whether those channels they don't have. I wanted to ask you, so one of the things we were talking about, and we've been talking about, especially when we think about data and we think about, you pretty much said exactly the same thing we were saying around extrapolating data and the challenges these agencies or these consultancies have of looking at historic data. But I think one of the interesting challenges I've seen in the past has been this, even just finding the data. So often, like, because you have these departments or you have these silos of parts, it's very hard for someone to say, okay, that sale was an online sale or an offline sale. And I think that there is, when you look at a journey, you look at a consumer's journey, you look at their experience, they, like you say, they don't think in channels and they actually meander between them all the time. So they may start on Instagram, see a cool shoe. They may want to go and hang out with their friends at the weekend. So they go around.
Might be on the mobile phone in the store, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say,
check the same product they're looking at on the mobile phone in the same moment.
We've seen it at Nike. Often people come in and say, I want this. Can you show me this? And the people in store were like, well, actually, that's a tier 0 shoe, and that's only available in sneakers, or it's only available in this store, and we live in Ireland, and we don't have it over here, and so on and so forth. But we do have this one. And actually, I really just wanted a red shoe, to be honest. And so these shoes are cool. I like these ones. And what do they do? And so on and so forth. And that journey across all the channels is like, okay, so how do you measure that sale? Is that a online sale? Because actually they went at the end of the day, they were on the bus and they were like, do you know what? I really should have got that shoe. Screw it. I'm going to go on .com and I'll buy it.
Yeah.
Is that an online shoe? Did the sale actually happen in the store because the associates kind of sold them on this other shoe that they could get?
The bigger question, Toby, is why do we care? Right?
Yeah.
The important thing is that the sales happened. Yeah. And the question is, would it have happened without the store and or without the online connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a big advocate for what I call no line retail.
Yeah.
No, there are no lines. So what we have to ask ourselves is, if we place a store in the middle of London, which role does it play? right? Is it adding to our total interaction with consumers, or I love to call them shoppers? Or is it a neutral thing, right? Or is that sale something we should see in isolation because it has no halo effect on the online sales, right?
Yeah.
But if you go to a no-line retail future, then we would just look at the sales that happen. We would try to understand.
Exactly. It was interesting you
store
saying this,
influencer.
Torben. Sorry. A couple of years ago, I was chatting with Charmaine Mason, who runs the Nike Town store in London. And she kindly spent a couple of hours showing my son around all the features. It was a wonderful morning for him. And at the end, she was saying, you know, if someone comes in this store and spends an hour looking at stores, talking to staff, trying on boots in the cage and having a workout session, and then stand in front of me and buy it on Amazon, she goes, I do not care, you know, because I have helped facilitate the sale of a Nike product. It does get quite difficult, you know, for certain businesses in that they will be measuring the store or even commissioning or rewarding staff for sales. And a lot of the sales that those staff have facilitated won't appear in the store. And that comes down to part of that siloing problem. And it's almost like companies need to reinvent their model of how they create, they produce, they also measure and reward. And there becomes the problem is it's not just the flip between the retail sales, it's about the whole operating model of the business to understand that.
And that's where I'm probably sounding a little bit ambivalent here, or like I'm contradicting myself in certain way, because I do believe in the ecosystem impact of stores, but I do not believe that we should not measure things like productivity. And the reason why is I think, you know, let's be honest about things here, right? In retail, it's very important to have very engaged sales staff, right? And have the excitement, but it's not always that we have it. Let's be honest, right? Yeah. It's not always the most desired job for the people who are working in stores as well. Some of them are in transition to doing something else that they would rather do in life, right? So I think it's very important to maximize, to optimize the revenue and productivity of a store and set ourselves targets, but we should not close our eyes to the ecosystem impact. So we should not decide solely if the store was successful or the sales staff was successful or not based upon that productivity, right? But we should use it to motivate ourselves, because there are only so many things we can measure as well, right?
It's interesting because it's also, if you thinking about a company that we both may know very well, not long ago, most of the marketing spend, or like especially brand spend, was never accredited to anything. So you could decide that you're going to do a pop-up in the middle of London with a big shoe box that would have maybe 3 or 4 different shoes in there, and it would really expensive, this thing. It was going to be the size of a building, but it looks like a shoe box. People are going to come in, they're going to have a great time and go on. If you ask somebody, that sounds great, you know, how many sales did you have? And they, do you know, we don't count that. And that's great, because in your world of kind of no line, you know that it's made an impact, and you can look at the overall sales and so on. The challenge is that if you go too far, you've got all these people spending millions of dollars on something when you're like, okay, you did this AR filter on your phone, and you've got this athlete, or you've got a pop star doing an AR filter, getting people running around London, like that cost you $2 million. And what impact did it really have? And you don't know, because we're kind of in this zero line or no line environment. And then you get to a point where there's an underinvestment in things like capabilities. So some of those really boring things like inventory management, making sure that you understand the right, as a shopper, they know that if it's on their website or it's on their Instagram, that it will be in store or not, and they know that ahead. That's really boring stuff. It's not sexy,
but it's essential.
That does drive sales, because I get in the store and go, that red shoe I really want. But unless you do that allocation, you can't do that. And I think you're right theoretically, in that there should be this kind of, why do you care? And therefore that you can have, okay, once the company does well. But unless you can somehow track that, I'm interested in trying to find ways and models to be able to track whether that's the engagement or the intention or something, that says, okay, it's worth spending $1 million on a bright red shoebox building.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I also agree with the marketing statement, right? I mean, I worked in marketing for quite a few years as well. And the only thing we knew about marketing, but really knew, right, was that 50% of the money we spent were wasted. We just didn't know which 50%, right? So
that's the constant challenge. That
was bloody capturing the marketing part, right? But we of course had some bearing, right? We were measuring consumer sentiments, preferences, intention to buy, and these kind of things, right? I personally believe, and that's where I think it sometimes goes wrong when we're talking about the measurements. We are trying to run business like it's a finite game, and it's not, right? It's an infinite game. I love when Simon Sinek is talking about this. He's very passionate about it, and I am as well. Because when it's an infinite game, you know, I was watching the new documentary about Pele, and he's saying, you know, the great thing when you won a championship is this sense of relief. In business, you don't have a sense of relief, right? It goes on. So the essence of all retail is to build relationships. Mm-hmm. And that's an ongoing thing, right? So it goes on for as long as we exist. And it's about strengthening those relationships over time. And the interesting thing is, if you go back to the 50s, not that I lived at that time, just to make a footnote, you know. But we had milkmen, right?
Yeah.
And they were dying out after the 50s, but they would come to your door, right? They would even come when they knew you were at home. Yeah. They would have a relationship. They would know your name. You would know their name. I even doubt if some of us are maybe the product of milkmen, right? That's how we talked about them. Let's be honest here, right? That was a very close relationship. Yeah. In many ways, this is what we're trying to mimic today in retail, isn't it? That's how close we actually are trying to get. But it's difficult because we are having a mass communication model that we need to drive it through. And suddenly we are making things difficult because we are not thinking what is at the core of retail. You know, I love the story about Jeff Johnson. I was in need of understanding something about when he in 72 was the first employee of Nike, right? And he was starting to build a sneaker business by selling cars out of the trunk of his car. And I was doing something for Nike around membership, right? And I wanted a good story. So I contacted Nelson Ferris, who is the director of heritage at Nike. And I asked him, do you have any videos with Jeff Johnson talking about what he did in the early days? And I didn't get any response for like a week and a half, right? And suddenly in my mailbox, Saturday evening, right? Email from Nelson Ferris. Unfortunately, I don't have any videos with Jeff Johnson, but I called Jeff, you know, and we talked about it. And Jeff said that what we don't understand today is what we did back then. Because he had the index cards, right? He would write down everything about his customers, when they're going for the next run, how fast they've been running. He understood everything that they cared about, right? And he would write them, wish you well on the next run, right? How did it go? How were the shoes, right? He had a very close connection, and he called it like the runners for runners approach, right? Because he was a runner himself. He could understand them and he spoke their language. And today, when we're doing membership, we're thinking too transactional. We are not trying to really build relationships, right? And I believe there are two sides to a relationship. One is the behavioral accept, and one is emotional accept. And you build them in different ways, right? But we have become so focused on building emotional effect through our branding and behavioral accept only through our retail. But we have to make it converge, right? To build loyalty, we need consumers and shoppers to feel a relationship with us, so that then 9 out of 10 times will buy our brand, right? And when we ask them, which brand do you love? They will say our brand name, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting you use that milk analogy, because I heard Toby on a podcast recently talking about that, how it was sort of the model's almost ahead of its game. I won't steal your thunder, Toby, but maybe you can explain that wonderful principle.
Well, I was just going to say that the milkman model, I think when I was a kid, we used to have milk delivered to our house. It was in an electric vehicle. So because they went to everybody's house, it was an electric vehicle. It was in sustainable packaging because it was in glass that they could reuse, and you didn't have to throw it away. You had a relationship with them, and you paid once a month. They would come with a little book, and you'd pay the money. So it's a subscription service. So if you described or pitched to a VC a subscription service with electric vehicles, sustainable packaging, which was based on loyalty and a relationship,
beautiful.
It's beautiful, and we had it in the 1970s. So it's
gone now, though, sadly.
We're almost talking about it in a romantic, nostalgic way, right? So then we know in our heart that something is right about it.
Yes.
It's just so hard to do at retail. And I think one thing that I learned during COVID-19, right? Because we had here in Amsterdam, like you probably had, we had times where stores were open and where they were locked down, right? And, the most powerful vehicle of physical retail is the connection between the staff in the store and the consumer, right?
Absolutely.
What I saw happening was saddening me a little bit, right? Because I would enter a store. What was the first thing that I heard? Hey, wash your hands, put on the mask, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's coming from fear, and I totally understand that, right? But if we want to get physical retail back to where it was, or close to where it was, above where it was, we can't talk like that to shoppers, right? We need to greet them and make them feel welcome. And then, hey, by the way, we need to wear masks now, and we have to wash our hands because otherwise we can't service you. I mean, we need to find that tone, right? We have to understand how important a vehicle that is. And I think, to the point that you were making earlier, Ian, that retail is in many ways, it's relationship building, but it's a funnel that is made of moments of truth, right?
Yeah.
From we're sitting at home, we're looking up the brand, to we think about which stores will we visit, are we going to buy online, what are we going to do, to we go on a shopping trip, so we stand in the store and we decide if we're going to stay, or it looks boring today, or too many people, whatever. And it goes through all of these steps until we buy, and we then use the product afterwards and have the experience and then act on it again, right? So all of those moments of truth, we have to make them right. And when we are today talking about experience retail, which I think was a little bit what you're alluding to, Toby, right? We get so excited about the big spectacles, right? We get excited about the big experience in the store, and hey, I've been a victim of that as well, right? Oh, if you put up a screen in the store and people can interact with it, hey, yeah, maybe. But what if they don't want to interact with it? Do we still want it to be there, right? We are doing some things in retail that we think are big, grand, and great, but consumers, shoppers, don't really think so.
I think it's key, isn't it? I call it relevant technology. It's understanding. Exactly. The principle to successful retail is easy to say and virtually impossible to deliver completely. And is understand how your customers want to buy, reverse into that, make it easy for them.
Absolutely.
And then you add layers of interest and intrigue and persuasion on top of it.
What the shopper wants, right?
How many bits of technology have you guys seen that I liken it to the Dragon's Den or was it Shark Tank? I think they call it in the US, where people come up with an idea, and most of them fail because they come up with an idea and they go, how do I make this work? Whereas the clever technology is, this is what the consumers want, so I will deliver something that helps facilitate it. It's like the tail wagging the dog. So yeah, the number of times, I in a previous slide had a conversation with a casino and bingo client of mine many years ago, and they go, we're going to put screens in the store. Long meetings and conversations about it, and not even a single thought about the content. And then you see, even Boots, the biggest pharmacy retailer in the UK, probably the biggest retailer in the UK by number of stores. They opened a flagship store in Oxford Street, and there was a massive video screen on the wall where the escalators went up. And I remember at the time, Johnny Wilkinson, the rugby player who was a hero when England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003, was running an advert for cholesterol tests. And they had the 30-second TV advert on the screen. And he's, you know, he's like a housewife's favorite, you know, he's not an ugly guy and he's obviously in good condition. And I watched and it took 20 seconds to get up the escalators and they're running a 30. And literally you could see some women like reversing down the escalator to carry on watching Johnny, you know, and it's just that simple. Yeah, we've got an ad, so let's use Johnny. And oh, we've got a big screen, let's stick it on there, you know. And it was a classic example of just not understanding the environment and what's relevant, you know. And I see that everywhere I go.
Yeah, one of the things I'm afraid of in the future is, you know, all of these whisper words of retail. You get super excited about them, right? And right now, one of them is experience retail. And I'm afraid that we are going to go in a direction of too much theater. You know, essentially, if you break it down to the basics of the psychology of shoppers, right? They go to buy a product or engage with a product, get information about a product. They do not go there to get entertained. There are better things to do to get really entertained. That not saying that it cannot be an entertaining experience, right? But we have to make sure that the sole purpose is not going to be the entertainment, but we need to make sure that we chain it together and we make the full experience a pleasurable one, right? You can have Michael Jordan in the store, right? But if you can't enter the store because there are too many people, it's a big crowd, right? Or you're there, you've been looking at Michael Jordan for 30 minutes and then you can't find the product you wanted to buy. Guess what? You're not very satisfied, right?
I think that one of the things that needs to be focused on as much, and we've touched on it a couple of times in our conversations, is this sense of when we think about entertainment, there's lots of different ways of entertaining people. The easiest way is to think about it like, as you mentioned, broadcast, and to say, okay, we're going to have one spectacle that you're going to queue up for, or maybe, you know, imagine a drive-in where everyone's driven in and you see this. That idea of I'm going to tell you something, and if I shout loud enough, you'll all hear about it and you'll all want to hear it. Those days have gone. If you just look at TikTok and Instagram and so on, they've gone. No one's watching TV in the same way. No one's even watching cinema in the same way. So you think about that world has gone. Then how you translate that to retail, the idea of everyone coming in, queuing up behind a velvet rope and going through an experience is gone. And I think it's just, and your point about theatre, the retail theatre was a big buzzword a few years ago and was like, it was a great idea for people getting in there. We haven't got people coming to stores. They don't feel safe. We don't want them to queue up anyway. And so to get them to come for this spectacle, I think is a leader. And in so the same way that we focused in digital in areas around community, areas around user-generated content, areas around the shoppers doing something that they want to do, I think is going to be the most important part. And so, you know, you've seen it in, I mean, can talk long about the Nike Run Club's experiences at stores, but that was something that started a few years ago. Lululemon has like yoga and community events in their stores now. And the idea of having more food and beverage options in stores is going to become more and more important, I think, because it enables people to come in to find an opportunity to get into the store, a reason to go into the store, but not something necessarily that, like you say, they're all going to stand around and look at an athlete.
No, I think, Toby, as long as it's relevant, right, and it fits with the whole experience, right? If you take the most banal example, and I see it in 9 out of 10 shopping trips that I'm at, right? You enter a store. What is the first thing a sales staffer is saying? Can I help you?
Yeah.
What do you answer? No, thanks, I'm just looking, right? Those are the words that most shoppers are saying within a year. No thanks, I'm just looking, right? And their relationship gone in half a second.
Yeah.
Yep.
If we can't teach that, right? If we can't learn how to engage in a conversation with shoppers from they enter into the store, how are we going to learn the rest, right? Because that's also part of the full experience, right? Then to your point, if you don't have good inventory management, you're standing at the shelf and there's this cool product, they just don't have your size, right? Or you have to check out and you have to stand in line for 30 minutes. You don't have time for that, right? So it's all part of one experience that can be broken down into a number of moments of truth, right? And that's what we wanted to achieve. I know you guys read the the article that I published, right? We wanted to go beyond productivity and not just talk about the effect of things, right? We wanted to talk about the causal factors. And that's why we created 2 new KPIs, because we also learned that most business people or retail people are not really looking much at numbers. And anyway, they would get like a list of 100 stores with 20 KPIs, right? And guess what? The human mind does not understand numbers. It's looking for patterns and comparisons, right? So we created 2 KPIs, one that was basically telling, hey, are you having a good in-store performance or not? And do you have a good flow, traffic to the store, relatively speaking? No. So one, shopper spend, the revenue per shopper in the store, and another one, shopper flow, the traffic per square meter in the store, which is comparable to other stores, right? Those 2 multiplied, by the way, is productivity. So it's really beautiful relationship, right? Because now you can map all of your stores in one chart, and you can see all of the stores that are having a high flow but low spend. Those are the stores where you want to do something about your in-store performance, right? Or at least you want to dig deeper in it. So we took the shopper funnel and we looked at in-store performance, and we looked at, hey, how can we translate all of the funnel steps, the moments of truth, to drivers, right? And even if we can't measure all of them, we can talk about them, right? And sometimes it's amazing what is coming out of those conversations, because guess what? The biggest experts in retail are the guys who are working out there in the stores, and we don't listen to them, right?
They make a massive,
and that's a big mistake.
Difference. I mean, they're living at 8 hours a day, aren't they? You know, I find whenever I go and visit a store, I'll sit and talk to members of staff, because they will talk about, oh, the queue's too long, or the people are getting in the way there, or that's never in stock, or people are constantly asking where this is because they can't find it. And it's free insight that companies have. So if they could just spend a bit of time talking to the store staff, okay, you have to filter out the moaning negative person, but you have to do that in any research. You know, but they will give you insight because they live and breathe it. It's a constant working trial event for them.
And the thing is, we keep hiring people, right? And that's fine, that maybe have never been working in a store, right? And we put them in a headquarter position, and suddenly they're experts in retail, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think everybody who's put in that kind of role should take the time to learn and also listen to people that are working out there on the front line, right? Because that insight is crucial for understanding what is really going on. And we should not assume that we know, right? I've been coaching a company for the past 7 years that's called Store DNA, not to make advertising here. I don't know if it's allowed.
I'll allow you one.
Allow you one. Just one, okay. I'll not mention the name again. But what they're doing is they're working with cameras in stores, right? And they can basically track shoppers moving around the stores, and they can basically identify those moments of truth and what is really going on. No, and suddenly you start seeing things that nobody would have thought about, right? In one big sports store, I'm not going to make advertising again, but in one big sporting goods store, right? We could see that the sales of one of the shoe shelves was relatively low. The productivity of that shelf. These cameras can see which product has been going off the shelf and for how long time and how many times, right? It's pretty neat. And we couldn't understand, right? And I said to the owner of this insights company, can you please zoom out? I would like to see a bit wider area. Yeah, give me the picture. You can do everything with these cameras, right? And I see there's like a bench where you can sit down and try shoes, which is really cool, right? But the bench was really close to the shelf. I said, Martin, please, that's the name of the guy, please move the bench a bit further away from the shelf, right? And he said, why? I said, I think that psychologically, shoppers feel like this is an obstacle. No, They might not see it. They can't even say it if you ask them.
Yeah.
Try to move it. Sales went up 127% just from moving one bench, right? These are these small moments of truth that we don't see and we don't care enough about in retail today. Another example, same company, right? Doing insights, and I'm not going to, mention the automaker name, right? But for one major automaker, in their car salon. So they had organized all of their cars by color, right? So they have different models of red color, different models of blue color, and so on, right? And they wanted to increase engagement in the car salon, in the auto salon, and they also wanted to increase conversion. And I said, Martin, have you talked to them about whether maybe they should start with merchandising their cars in a different way? What do you mean? Why? I said, I don't go to buy a red car. I'm sorry. And then I'm choosing which make or which model according to price and so on. I know basically which price range and which kind of model I'm interested in. I'll figure out the color, no? So in a car salon, no, in an auto salon where the consideration is a high consideration buy, right? High engagement, we could increase the conversion with more than 40% by changing the merchandising of cars, putting them by model and having different colors that people could choose between. It's so basic, but if you can do that with cars, you can move anything.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to care, because that's how you build the relationship.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
All of these things are part of a relationship and experience, right?
I agree. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I completely lost track until Zoom kindly popped up and started moaning and reminded me. But so what I want to do is that thank you very much for that, Torben. I feel that conversation could have gone on for several hours, and we didn't even get around to the geese. So that's
no, we'll have to do that next time. That's super exciting, mate.
I appreciate that. So thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciated that.
Thanks for having me, guys. And
no, that's no problem. And take care, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, take care, guys, and have a nice day and night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, we've actually managed to wind up properly, and we may even actually do a proper wind up one of these sessions today, which is cool. But it's fascinating talking with someone like Torben, because I think he has such a broad perspective on a lot of aspects. So I always viewed him as an insight and analytics person, but he has a much broader understanding.
Yeah, and I think it just demonstrates that the need to actually combine the qualitative side of whether it's using cameras or whether it's using surveys and just listening to in-store staff. Like, it's important to get that side to marry with the hard data side, which I think so many people just focus on. So you get a good combination of both. I think that's obviously going to have the most success.
I agree. And it was also interesting to read that your former employer, Nike, have just announced that analytics people are going to be sitting side by side with creatives, you know, in the workspace. And it is astonishing how often that understanding and the activation of that understanding are siloed in businesses. So it doesn't surprise me that someone like Nike does that. I think the challenge is that you get that relationship working, but it's quite reassuring to see that businesses are seeing the benefit of the two working hand in hand rather than isolation as well.
And I think they've had such a problem of siloing even the intelligence. So the knowledge and the intelligence is siloed into a small space, that it acts as a sort of service that you have to go and ask for a report and you get a PDF and it wasn't quite the data you wanted. And so being able to shift that to be a much more relationship with creatives, I think, is only going to get much more success.
I agree. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. Enjoy the lovely sunshine out in Joshua Tree. I'm not jealous at all. And we'll catch up on the next podcast and carry on from there.
Yeah, take it easy. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.